Hi, everybody. I'm Dave,
And I'm John.
and this is Coffee and Capes, podcast where we two enthusiasts talk about two of our favorite things: drinking coffee and geek culture.
It's true. We do every week.
Every week, we've been so consistent. I'm proud of us.
I know. Hey, it's so good. So good. Break your arm, patting yourself on the back.
Right? Exactly.
Yeah.
And we're so grateful that you have found us in whatever manner you have, whether that's through the podcast venue, maybe on YouTube, or any of the other ways. John, let the people know the other ways they can find us besides the one they're on right now.
Yeah. So like Dave said, if you're watching us, you found us on YouTube. If you're listening to us, you probably found us on Spotify, iTunes, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, any of your podcast listening options. You can also interact with us on social media. We're on Twitter, we're on Facebook, we're on Instagram. Feel like we're on Instagram a lot.
We are.
And probably the most active in terms of responding to people. We try to get around to Facebook too. And then you can send us emails at supers, SUPERS, at coffeeandcapes.com. And then you can go to our website, coffee, the letter N, the word capes.com. It's not live yet. We just have a landing page up, but it's got a fun little countdown there and some links that you can click on to find us in places and sign up for information about when Coffee and Capes Coffee is going to launch. We're probably about a month out from that. Thanks to everybody who's reached out and been excited and been asking when the coffee is available. We've sent out a couple mugs to some people just to say thanks. So if you'd like a mug, drop us a line somewhere. We're happy to send you a mug. They're pretty cool. And yeah.
They are pretty cool. If you're on Facebook, if you're on the YouTube,
you can see Dave's.
Right.
That's the signature cup.
Yep.
It's got the logo on it, and then on the back it says heroically great coffee. We have some other ones though too. We've got like a travel mug that's really cool. Nicole over at Ladybird Provisions grabbed one. She got it yesterday. She really liked it. Sent a picture. It's so nice. So yeah, that's kind of where we're at, guys. That's how you found us.
Awesome. We're glad you're here along for the ride. We're gonna have some fun today. Like we
tell your friends.
Yes. Tell your enemies. I mean, tell your arch enemies.
Yeah. Tell your favorite comic book shop.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So Dave, but we are about coffee as well. So what are you drinking today?
I am enjoying from Lavazza. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but the Italian coffee company there. It's their organic for planet blend. It's mild and fruity, and it's a little mild, but it's still tasty, and it's doing the job this morning. So thank you, Lavazza.
Nice.
And they said this brand, this one is, I'm not sure exactly how, but on the bag it says managing climate change, which obviously is a thing we need to do. So I appreciate the coffee company doing their best to be good citizens as well.
Nice. I am drinking a Starbucks, one of their fancy roasts, the Hawaiian Kona blend, which is really good. Kona beans are some of the top that you can get anywhere. They're really phenomenal. They tend to be a little bit more expensive, but the taste is just amazing. This one's super smooth, has a really nice, like, kind of citrusy taste to it a little bit, I want to say, but also has a nice, smooth, like kind of chocolate finish to it. Really good coffee. I'm enjoying it a lot. The bag is now empty, and so I am a little heartbroken this morning. And I'm going to try and milk this for all I can. And I'm out of Ladybird Provision coffee bombs. I got to pick some up before we hit the road.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah.
Do not be out of those. I think I used up my last one the other day as well.
Yeah, we gotta get some more, man. Gotta get some more. We're hooked. We're addicted.
Indeed. Sweet. Well, let us know what you're drinking. What kind of coffee are you drinking today? And let's go into our next segment, our most recently devised segment, but it's been going for a few episodes now. And that is what we call fan fiction, where we interact with one of the ways you've interacted with us. What do you
Yeah.
got for us today for fan fiction, John?
So last week it was Valentine's Day, and we spent last week kind of talking about power couples and comics. Everybody did. If you listen to any of the other podcasts out there, shout out to a lot of those guys as well. But we posted up a picture of Thanos and Death, which is his one true love, and my buddy Adam made a really good point on this one, and it made me chuckle because it made me realize comic book sometimes are accurate in terms of how we are in real life. And he said the whole Infinity War situation was started just to try and impress her, and it's true. It's 100% accurate, and that was a really great crossover in Infinity War. But it also, kind of harkens back to like some of the other stories you hear. If you think back to Helen of Troy, right? that one kind of, that whole war.
Yeah.
The Trojan horse, everybody,
right. The face that launched 1,000 ships, something like that.
Launched 1,000 ships. Yeah, man. So, thanks, Adam, for the comment and, for always supporting us. Really appreciate it, buddy. And thanks to everybody else for listening. It's super appreciated. We really do appreciate the support. Absolutely. And just so you know, Dave, I didn't tell you this. We made it into the FeedSpot top 80 comic book podcast.
Wow.
Yeah, which was pretty cool. So thanks, FeedSpot, for letting us know that we made your list. We are that was pretty cool to find out.
Very cool.
Yeah. I didn't know that many people listened to us. I'm gonna be honest. I thought like it was just the same 10 people over and over and over again, of which I am one. I listen to our podcast to see like how goofy we sound.
Yeah.
Man, it's hard to listen to yourself.
It's a challenge for sure. It's something you gotta get used to. Yeah. I've been experiencing that for 25 years or whatever now. So
yeah, you've done it for way longer. I started listening to our podcast in the car, like going to get coffee and stuff, and I'm like, that's what I sound like. No wonder I'm annoying.
Well, I mean, at least you have that nice baritone voice. I've got the kind of whiny one, so I'm sure people much appreciate it when I shut up and let you talk.
No, I doubt it.
The dulcet tones of John Zeke.
I probably just put everybody to sleep. And today, just grab a comic, some coffee, sit back, close your eyes. Yeah, I'm putting people to sleep. It's not good. All right. Enough of that nonsense.
ASMR with coffee and
ASMR.
Is that the thing? I don't even know.
I don't know if it's
something. It's some combination of letters that makes no sense.
Yeah, I don't know.
It doesn't actually stand for something.
Right. I have no idea. I don't.
Why are we down this rabbit hole? Let's stop. Let's stop digging ourselves down this rabbit hole.
While we're in a rabbit hole, though, have you watched Yellowstone? And can we talk about Kevin Costner really quick again?
No and no.
Damn it.
I'm just here to suck all the joy out of your experience today.
Ray, it's a comic book podcast.
That's
Ray,
right. Comics, right. Ray.
I'm gonna make it a mission. We're gonna work Kevin Costner into every episode at some point.
I think we missed 2 or 3.
We missed one. Yeah, I'm gonna bring him on.
Okay.
Kevin Costner, if you're listening, if you'd like to be a guest.
It's your lifelong dream to be a guest on Coffee and Cakes.
That's right. My first question for you is, when did you know it was time to give up on the British accent on Robin Hood?
Aw.
Even Christian Slater managed to pull off a British accent in that movie.
Did he though? Did he?
I mean, as much as the Jack Nicholson sound-alike of the 90s can do it, he still gave it a shot.
He did. We are so far afield right now. Let's reel it back in.
All right, let's reel it back in.
Because we have some fun stuff we want to talk about today.
We do. If you're looking at our backgrounds and you're watching me try and fight my way out of my grandpa sweater.
Old man sweater.
My old man sweater. I love that old man sweater, man. It's so comfortable. All right. If you're looking at our backgrounds, though, Dave, what are we talking about today?
We are talking about comic book events.
Events. Sunday.
Tractors, comic books. I don't know.
There you go. That's the next podcast we start. Tractors and comic books. Wah!
Yeah,
Tractor
about
pulls.
that. You're gonna have to find a different host for that, co-host for that
Oh
one.
man, I have really got to drink less coffee.
You really do. So no, we're talking about comic events because it's a whole thing. It's a staple now of the comic book industry.
Happens all the time.
Seems like almost every year. In fact,
I'd say multiple times a year we get crossovers now. But one of the things I will say, I think before we dive into kind of some of the likes and dislikes, because we've talked about this topic specifically a number of times, it is, I think, one of the gifts that we've been given through crossovers is more continuity in the storytelling of the comic book individual themselves. Because if you remember back to, when I first started reading comic books, most comic books were like one-shot stories.
Right.
So you had like one issue that had Magneto facing off against the X-Men. They defeated him in that one issue, or he ran away and then that was it. Right. So you crammed a whole bunch of like stuff into one, and then the next one moved on and focused on something else.
Right.
Now maybe it's not continuity that I'm talking about, but it's more like
more of a
storytelling,
elongated storytelling.
There you go. More elongated storytelling.
Yeah. That stories take place over 2 or 3 or 4 or often 6 issues.
Right.
And of course, there's a business reason for that most of the trade the collections in graphic novels, in trade paperback graphic novels, collect 6 issues. So, there's an incentive to make storylines last about 6 issues.
Yeah. I would agree. And the other thing it does is it gets you coming back to buy next week if you're a collector, right? I mean, I went in, I was at Graham Cracker Comics here, right? And shout out to Daniel, by the way, at Graham Cracker Comics in California. Hey, buddy, like, thanks for all your suggestions. We'll miss coming into your store. But I went in there and was looking at the Death of Doctor Strange and looking at the new Defender series and just, scooped up all of them, because there's that story continuity that is drawn out across the whole story. Yeah, you can read the whole thing, and you don't want to miss. It draws you in. So that makes sense, and I think that stemmed from the success of week over week over week buying in. From things like, well, your background, Dave, Secret Wars.
Yeah, so I'm going to start with Secret Wars as an event. I think it's the first like overarching comic book event that I was aware of.
It's the first one I can think of. Yeah.
I don't think it registered to me as an event. I just knew it was a special limited miniseries. Yeah. And it was going to be 12. It was going to be 12 issues.
And it was so cool.
It was so cool. And
because you got all of your favorite heroes.
Yeah, exactly. And to me, that's kind of part of what makes an event is that it spans, if not the entire like Marvel DC universe, to the entire comic universe in that publisher, at least a good portion of it.
Yeah,
it's more than just Marvel team up where Spider-Man and Daredevil happen to be at the same place at the same time.
Right.
It's all of your favorites, or at least a lot of them.
Yeah, and I mean, if you look at the little price tag panel in the upper whatever corner of your background, in the upper left hand corner, you see all the characters that were involved in it. You've got She-Hulk in there, you've got Thor, Reed Richards, Thing, you've got Spider-Man, Iron Man, and then you got Wolverine and Storm. I mean, that in and of itself, right, indicates that this is clearly tying a lot of major books and characters together, and really like went a long way to establish how successful something like that could be. So much so that I don't remember how soon on the heels of Secret Wars 2 was, with like the Beyonder.
With Beyonder coming to Earth. I remember that one as well. I'm not sure. I want to say it was a year later. maybe.
I can't remember how
Yeah,
long the
I don't know
gap
for
was
sure.
between.
But and that's to me the downside. Like I I can remember maybe 2 panels of Secret Wars 2. And that was
Ooh,
when Beyonder came to, so in Secret Wars 2, Beyonder comes to Earth,
yeah.
and he meets up with Spider-Man, and he's trying to understand how to be human, and he's hungry, and Spider-Man figures out that he's hungry. He's like, I've got this pain in my stomach. All right, you need to eat. It's like, well, now I've got another pain in my stomach, and Spider-Man figures out, well, it means he's got to go to the bathroom.
He's got poop.
Yeah, he's got to poop, exactly.
He's got poop.
And other than that, like I Secret Wars 2, I think was meh. But Secret Wars, the first Secret Wars, the original Secret Wars, was a lot of fun. And in part, I think because it transported these heroes to somewhere else. So, like in the Avengers book, I was reading the Avengers book at the time, like there was a disturbance at Central Park or something, and they all go and they disappear.
Mm-hmm.
And that happens with the other heroes too, with the X-Men and the Fantastic Four and whoever else. And they all end up in this new planet in space, and they're all like, what is going on here? And then there's some villains as well. And it's a fun way, I think, for Marvel to play around with the characters that doesn't necessarily have to match normal continuity.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I would agree with you. I actually really enjoyed Secret Wars 2. For me, that one, if I remember this correctly, like we saw Spider-Man gain a level of like prominence and power in Secret Wars 2 that he, for me, it was kind of the first time you really saw like how intensely strong Spider-Man actually could be.
Yeah.
Which I enjoyed. I thought was cool. And that was, I didn't remember much out of the first Secret Wars because I didn't really read a whole bunch of it, but I bought every issue of Secret Wars 2 and followed that one and thought, well, this is really cool. They should do this kind of thing, more often. And I knew of Secret Wars, but so for me, that was kind of my launching point into crossovers like that. And then we started to see, I think, the trickle down effect of the success of the book sales from those into multi like issue spanning events that weren't even crossovers, right? So you think about, I want to say somewhere not too long after that, we started to see like the X-Men's Mutant Massacre.
Yeah.
Right, which was multiple comics, had a very like intense moment where Colossus like kind of breaks his gentle giant character and snaps the neck of one of the Reavers in the tunnels. I'll never forget that one, man. That was just like, that stuck with me, to see a character like that like break to the point they just like reaches out and snaps the neck. And it wasn't, somewhere after that, I think we saw our like the first really, and it was kind of a weird attempt when you think about the history between these two comic franchises, but the Avengers versus like the Justice League crossover, the very first one that ever happened, which I think everybody dies for. Like as a fan, you're like, oh, I can't wait to see this. This is going to be so cool. And who are they going to put up against who, and those kinds of things. And then at the end of the day, like every battle is super fast, super rushed, super, just doesn't land well. It's cool to see.
Yeah.
But when you really break it down, you're like, you could have done it better.
Okay.
They could have done that one better.
Yeah. So before we leave Secret Wars, I just want to I want to highlight a couple of things that stand out for me from it. And one, I don't remember exactly the setup, but the Dr. Doom becomes kind of the big bad.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a whole wish fulfillment thing going. So like he takes off his mask and he's able to make his face whole again. Yeah. And Ben Grimm, the Thing, is able to transfer back and forth from being human to rock form. And I don't know what happens when they go back, to back home, for those two things. But I remember, there's one panel I remember in particular where the group of heroes were hiding out from the bad guys for whatever reason, and they're beaten and hurting and whatever, and I think Doom basically drops a mountain on them, and you think they've been crushed. And then the first panel of the next episode is Hulk just like by himself holding up this mountain on his back, and just like I don't know, there was something about that that's really like just really hit home for, oh my goodness, Hulk is
right
next level strong.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then the other big thing that comes out of Secret Wars is it's where Spider-Man gets the black suit, which eventually becomes, which seems to be just doing what his, responding to his thoughts. And later, of course, becomes the whole symbiote and Venom and brings us down that road. But
yeah,
without Secret Wars, we wouldn't have Venom.
Right.
So thank you, Secret Wars.
Thank you, Secret Wars, because we love Venom.
Yeah.
They really are. I think Secret Wars 1 and Secret Wars 2 were kind of the launching point of crossover in comic books. I can't think of a DC one that predates that. And if somebody does and somebody remembers one, like send it to us. Happy to,
all right,
look at that. And
back in the day, I was reading a lot more Marvel than DC.
Yeah, I mean, I think my DC was pretty limited to no, I read like Batman, of course. I think everybody read Batman for a little bit. Some Superman, though Superman went through weird stuff in the 80s. He had a mullet at one point, just weird. And then of course Green Lantern.
I had a mullet in the 80s too, so
so did I. And then of course Flash. Like I was a big Green Lantern and Flash, two of my favorites, which
yeah. So speaking of Green Lantern, what's the next event you want to highlight?
Yeah, so just because it's on the background, I think that and this one really launched Jeff Johns into prominence within the DC and comic book universe because of Blackest Night. Such it's just such a cool storyline, right? To see that there are different power rings and across the color spectrum, and that each one represents something else. And what made it even more interesting, you had, as you can see behind me, I can't, is it necrotics? Necrotos?
Yeah,
something like that. I'm rereading it now and I can't remember exactly his name, but the main guy from like the Black Ring of Death like group that brings dead heroes back to life, starting with Batman, who's a main one. But it was interesting to see in this one where heroes and villains landed on the color spectrum. I thought that was really cool. Right, like Flash was pulled in, like a lot of the heroes were into the Black Ring of Death, essentially. But then when that comes off and the ring starts seeking people out, and people start kind of landing with different colors, he ends up blue, which was super cool. And blue's like the super spiritual, does a lot of good, kind of calms everybody down, which was very appropriate, I felt, for kind of, if you read any of Flash's, the books on Flash, is specifically around Barry Allen. Barry Allen is kind of like the heart of, I feel like the heart of the Justice League.
Okay.
Right, because he's just always focused on good, helping as many people as he can, and focused on good and just being good.
Which makes sense for his power set, right? That he more than just about anybody other than Superman can help the most people in the shortest amount of time.
Yeah, in the shortest amount of time. And he's always like, sometimes it draws him into those situations where he feels like he can't stop running. Like if he stops running, he's gonna lose, and people are gonna die, and he's gonna fail everybody. And it's really easy to play on that. So he's very empathetic, and that comes through in this. But it was interesting because right before this was Final Crisis, where Batman gets hit by Darkseid's I-beams. They call them something specific, and I can't think of what they are.
Omega beams, maybe.
Yeah, the Omega beams. And he gets hit by those and dies. And this storyline opens with like Barry and Hal at Bruce's grave talking about, losing Bruce and everything else, how he's gone, like he's really gone. And then, we get zombie Batman for a little bit, but really well done. It was a long crossover.
Yeah.
When I was looking at it last night, I just out of curiosity was flipping through to see, how many issues did this, like, what was the time frame that this went through? And it literally went from like July of 1 year into like the next year. It spanned months.
Yeah.
It was crazy.
Yeah, that's a good one. I will admit I have not read much of that. I think I've had more interaction with the Blackest Night characters from the Injustice video game. Because
that's a good game.
Yeah, they're characters, versions of the character that you can get that are the Blackest Night versions and have different abilities. It's kind of fun, actually.
It actually really is. Yeah, that's a really fun game. I've played it on like iPads and stuff before. I don't.
Yeah, I have. Yeah, we have the console version, but the PS4 version. But I'm terrible at it because I'm old. But,
that's because we had joysticks.
Right.
With
exactly.
Button,
yeah. One button, one joystick, one button. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I was good at that.
Right. Yeah, I'm pretty good at the iPad version. Like that's
of that iPad version. Same.
Yeah.
Same. Well, Dave, we've talked about a couple we really like, but there have definitely been some swings and misses, right?
For sure.
What's one that we kind of look at and go, could have been better?
Yeah. So this is low hanging fruit, but you can't bring up missed opportunity events and bypass talking about Civil War 2 from Marvel.
Yeah.
Which obviously Civil War is pretty famous now because they did the movie for it, and the Cap versus Iron Man and Registration or Not, like that. There was pretty much of a decent philosophical existential battle there. Like, what's really the right thing to do here?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say that story, in the movies was a very truncated version of what was going on, and in the comics, it was so much more drawn out, and it stemmed from such a tragic loss of life, and in the movie it did too, but in the comics it was the young Avengers, and they take on some guys who are a little bit out of their league, and one of them ends up blowing up and killing like kids, like destroys a school full of children, and the next thing we see is all the heroes like picking through the rubble, and that's what kicks that off. And it felt really grounded in a very powerful argument.
Right. We've got to do something about this. This can't. These sorts of weapons can't be left unchecked.
Right. But then, there was the other side of that. Like, what happens when you give essentially super weapons in the form of human beings over to government control?
Yeah.
Right. Let's be real honest here. Governments don't have a long history of using those kinds of things in the right way, and not suddenly finding a selfish reason to use them to, further their own agenda. Right. And so Cap had a very real argument against that. And while, so it wasn't a frivolous, I don't want to do it because I don't want to sign your paper kind of thing. Right. It was, we can't give these guys, like, Cap's experience alone showed him, if we give the government control over us, they point us and tell us where to go, who to fight, who not to fight.
Right. And eventually the Avengers become, to cross-pollinate here, become the boys.
Right. Yep. Yeah. No, that's a good point, right? They become a twisted version of what they stood for.
Right. Yeah.
You
Or
know,
they can't stand for anything anymore because they only are allowed to go when and where they're told. And that wasn't okay. But that's Civil War. We're talking about Civil War 2.
Yeah.
Which, again, there's a real world component to Civil War. There's some real world components there about how we handle guns and
right.
in our country, and who's allowed to have them and when and where, and that's a whole thing, obviously. But well, I don't know if we want to go there, but unregulated, like we end up with Sandy Hook, and that's not okay, obviously. But in Civil War 2, again, they took a real world problem, and that is, what do we do with intelligence, with knowledge of somebody who's going to do something to hurt others,
Right.
and how do we act on that?
What's funny is, I literally, as you were talking prior to that sentence right there, I was like, this was such a lackluster crossover event. I couldn't remember what the impetus was for it until you just now said that. And I was like, oh yeah, it's the Inhuman kid.
Yes.
Who they find out can see the future.
Right.
And
or
once
more specifically sees a future.
Right. Sees a future. And, one side wants to use it to preemptively go after people. And then the other side's like, no, you can't do this. And it was Tony and Carol who fell on different sides of that argument.
Right.
And that just tells you the fact that, like, it was so easy to remember the original Civil War impetus and almost everything that goes along with that story. And then the second one, I couldn't remember that off the top of my head. And then the only other thing I remember is, like, Miles Morales played such a big role. And even that didn't seem to pay off right.
Yeah. And the other big thing that I remember from it, I think this is from that, it's so nebulous. I might be mixing things up, but Bruce Banner at that point was like trying to not become the Hulk anymore. And he had a whole thing set up where if he starts to Hulk out, he's got Hawkeye set up to kill him.
Yeah. He gave him
put an arrow in his ear and into his brain and kill him before he can Hulk out.
Yeah.
And doesn't that happen in that?
And he did
in that event.
Yeah.
Because they go to confront him. Like they get the report from the Inhuman kid that Hulk's going to go rampaging. And so they all
tons of people are going to die.
Yeah. A bunch of people are going to die. So they go to confront him to keep him from rampaging, but going to confront him causes him to begin to Hulk out. And so then Hawkeye takes him out.
Right. Well, and then that was kind of the part of that story was, he didn't see the entirety of the possible future. He saw like an end result, but couldn't tell you like what were the steps that led up to it. And the argument that Tony made was, how do we know that our actions that we're taking now aren't what causes this to take place? And Carol's like, we know what's going to happen. We have to go stop it. And it really became one, was like almost repetitive in a boring way.
There's nothing almost about it for me.
Okay.
Like that's what I remember most about reading that series in real time was every single issue or of that series was Carol saying, we absolutely need to use this technology. And Tony saying, we absolutely can't use this.
Right.
That's all that happened. It was just a version of that over and over and over again, every single time. And I'm just like, what are we doing?
Yeah. And that was one of those crossovers that felt like just a cash grab.
Yeah.
Like, hey, we know this formula works. We see slumping sales in comics. Let's make this thing and give ourselves a boost.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that it worked for a moment, but come on, guys, like comic book collectors, we're not going to buy comics just for the sake of buying comics. Like if we see, something isn't paying off, we tend to kind of draw back in. And sure, you may pick up a couple more issues and give it a little bit of a chance. But at some point, everybody's like, just wait for like the trade if I want to read the rest of it, or I'll read it on, for me, it was the Marvel Unlimited app. And, I was like, well, it's on the Unlimited app. I'll go ahead and read it. And even then I was like, I'm going to take a break. This is just driving me nuts.
Right.
Like, just figure it out, guys, fight each other and get it over with.
Yeah. And, there's a long history of it's kind of fun when the heroes fight each other. Like that often seems to happen. But it just, and here's an opportunity to make a real statement about, in the real world, what do we do with intelligence about impending attacks, and how do we
knowledge?
Yeah. And it just kind of fell flat, I think. So, John, how about you? Do you have another event you want to?
Yeah. And we were talking about this one, and this is one of those weird ones that from a storytelling perspective is really good. And again, we fall into heroes fighting heroes, right? Which seems to happen more and more and more and more now. It's funny, when I was in the shop the other day, I heard people talking about, it seems like, villains are getting standalone comics and, getting these amazing backstories and good runs. And like heroes don't actually fight villains anymore, that they tend to just fight each other, which I was like, yeah, that kind of seems to happen a lot anymore.
Some truth to that, yeah.
But this was one of those that, man, I think was like a long time coming. And then when it landed, was super exciting. And what killed it for me at times was the art was so off mark. And that's the Avengers versus X-Men. What a great opportunity to see, Cyclops had finally started to be portrayed as like this amazing strategist and leader, kind of on par, like the mutants version of Captain America that everybody saw as like the shining beacon of everything the X-Men stood for, and was bringing everybody together. And it saw, like, the one thing I will say about that series is it saw some pretty gut-wrenching things happen. Like Cyclops kills Xavier
right
in front of the world, and does a massive turn in his trajectory to become reviled from being held up as this shining beacon and savior of mutant kind at a time when mutants were kind of struggling, to suddenly being on the run and hated by everybody. But that's after it happened. But and it was, the Phoenix Force obviously is coming back to Earth, and they realize that it's aiming for Hope. And so the Avengers, with the aid of Wolverine,
because he was he's in both, right, at that point.
Yeah, because he's in both.
He's in both teams.
And he's traumatized. He remembers the Phoenix, and it traumatizes him because he's the one that had to kill Jean.
Yeah.
And he's very adamant, like they got to go and grab Hope, like they got to snatch up Hope. And all of a sudden, Cap and an entire helicarrier full of Avengers comes knocking on the X-Men's door.
Yeah. And here again, it's kind of the central issue is, what do we do about this weapon that's coming to Earth?
Mm-hmm.
And it just sort of felt like, to me, couldn't they talk it out a little bit? Like, if Cap and Cyclops are both these grand strategists, and both are looking out for the best for their people and for all people in some ways, seems like there should have been more of a diplomatic solution. Now, that doesn't make for a very interesting event, right? But
and that's the thing, right? You got to look at it from the terms of like, do you want diplomatic solution, or do you want like, here we go, bam,
right?
Bam, bam.
Yeah. I think from the cash grab standpoint of that series, and I was guilty. I bought a bunch of these. There was sort of a sideline of just flat out fights. It was just AVX. Here are some fights that theoretically happened on the outskirts of, in the midst of these stories. And we talked about this last week, that one of those, I'm pretty sure, was Black Panther versus Storm. And it's part of the reason that their marriage had to break up, because they couldn't reconcile over this thing. And there were some pretty good battles, but I mean, talk about just simply publishing comics for the sake of just purely for sales and not so much telling a story. It was literally just, oh, what happens if these two characters fight?
Yeah, I will say, so I'm going to say that the Avengers, I feel there's two paths here, right? So you had Avengers versus X-Men, which was the storytelling piece.
Yeah.
That, was more complex, that was much deeper and much richer, but was sometimes very hampered by the artwork, as we've discussed. Like some issues were just beautiful, and some I opened up and went, what happened?
Yeah.
Where did, who did this one and why? Not saying I could do it better. So I feel like that's like me nitpicking, but I do like art. To me, it's important in the story.
Right.
And I'm not saying
a
I'm
big
an
piece
artist.
of the medium, for goodness sakes.
Yeah, I'm not saying like I'm an artist and I could do it better. I probably can't draw stick figures to save my life. But that being said, right, it is important and it'll take you out of the story. But you had that. So you had the Avengers versus X-Men, which, showed the Phoenix and the Phoenix 5 and, everything else that was going on there. And then to your point, you had A versus X, which was 100% a cash grab of, because I felt like Avengers versus X-Men was selling well.
Yeah.
And then somebody went, you know what we should do? Make more money. You know how we do that? This.
Fight. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Ready? Fight.
Yeah.
Dun 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 dun.
Well, I remember at the time they were marketed that way, like no story, all fighting.
Yeah. And you know what it was?
Dummy me, I bought him anyway.
Right? The only thing that was missing at the end of each of those A versus X magazines was the bad guy from the first Mortal Kombat game saying something like fatality or something like that, right? Or finish him. Right. Like every now and then pops up and just does that in a panel and you're like, yeah, okay, that seems about right for this issue.
Yeah.
And it was just unfortunate that they went that far, that they did that instead of just said, hey, let's put all of our energy and effort into this story over here. The
main story.
Sure. So for me, it was very exciting and then a letdown at the same time. Yeah. But what's one, Dave, that you can look back on it and it's just like, man, it like checked all the boxes for you.
Sure. Yeah. For me, I'm going to say it's fairly recent, just in the last few years, War of the Realms.
Yeah.
Now granted, as I've established multiple times in this podcast, I'm a big Thor guy, and without all the white supremacy like ways that's been co-opted, which sucks, obviously. But I especially like the long run that Jason Aaron had on that Thor, and the way he wove that. It's a one long story, really, that starts from his run on Thor, and like the Thor book had a couple of different titles, and then he was on Worthy, and then we had Jane Foster Thor, and then and that led into the War of the Realms. And I just loved how they brought everybody in, like literally the entire Marvel world universe, like all 10 realms. Bring in the elves, and you bring in the dwarves, and you bring in the fire goblin things, and
right.
and all of that, and how it and the angels, Thor's half sister Angela, and it just, I loved the little team ups that ended up happening. I love the way Freya got to be kind of a leader in that. It sort of sidelined Odin, but then there was just a beautiful issue in the midst of that where Thor and Odin sit down and have a talk, and I literally cried in the midst of like this father-son moment that they had in that book. Like, it was so moving. And I think the art was terrific. It had real consequences to the characters going forward, and they weren't afraid to be bold. Every single freaking Valkyrie was wiped out in the midst of it. And we got Thor redemption.
It was a cool storyline, and it almost got lost to me as I thought it was and some kind of continuation or extension of remember the battle world.
Yes. Yeah.
Right, there were some similarities there with like some of that to me, and I was like, is this just an extension of this, until you and I were talking about it and you brought it up, and I was like, oh, so this is different. And I remember reading the issue with Thor and Odin sitting down and talking and thinking, and we talked about that issue actually after we had both read it, I think.
I think so.
Just the beautiful aspect of like the conversation, the heart to heart that they were having, and that reconciliation that Odin was trying to make and explain, like, this is, I'm sorry, like, I never said these things and I should have. And it had heart.
Yes.
War of Realms had excitement and energy like so many others do, but then at the end it had a level of heart to it.
Yes.
That was very touching. And that underlying like father son current of that I thought made it very good.
And I thought the art was terrific throughout.
Yeah,
and
it was great.
At least solid throughout. Like it was consistent. I think it was consistent.
Yeah, I agree.
How about you, John? You got an event that really just hit on all cylinders for you?
Yeah, I mean, and you know what? It's absolutely one of my favorites. I think I've reread this event a bunch of times, and that is The Siege. Kind of along the Asgard theme, right?
Yeah.
But we had it was on the heels of Secret Invasion, and Norman Osborn and the Dark Avengers had taken over, and
I think it was called that era.
Yeah, Dark Reign, which led into The Siege, right? So it was kind of a long, like, drawn out series, but man, you got Asgard in Oklahoma, like all the Asgardians trying to like survive, and the people of Brockton, Oklahoma, just kind of like, they randomly show up in town from time to time, but we've learned, they're neighbors and all this jazz. But you had Thor was, walking around in his I think David Blake.
Donald
Blake. Thanks. I was thinking David Blaine, but that guy's a magician.
That's a different,
totally different ballgame. Right. Donald Blake, walking around in his human persona, Donald Blake, and hitting the staff every now and then. Tony was, by the time we get to the siege happening, right? Cap had been in hiding forever. Yeah. Tony was all messed up and, laid up somewhere.
Right.
And all of a sudden, like, big surprise, Norman Osborn goes a little, because he's been playing with Loki, and Loki will drive anybody crazy.
Yes.
And convinces him that they need a catalyst to, Loki's still trying to grab the throne from like Balder, and they send what's his name? The big guy from
Volstagg.
Thank you. They send Volstagg out into the world, and he ends up, facing
killing some people. Yeah.
A whole lot of people in a stadium, right? Like, and that happens. And so Norman Osborn and his crew and the entire initiative attack Asgard.
Yeah. They use that Volstagg thing to set up, like, they set him up to kill that whole stadium, and as the excuse to attack Asgard, to attack Asgard.
Yeah. And it's just, there's beautiful artwork all throughout,
for sure. Yeah,
like amazing and incredible artwork. The storytelling is so well done. We get to see the Sentry like unleashed, and he just destroys Asgard, essentially on his own. But there's just there's a moment, and I believe it's in the siege, where like Taskmaster is, leading his team against some people, and then gets smacked down. And, there's just some memorable stuff that happens. I think my favorite part of that is, Cap shows up finally.
Yeah.
Like, gets up off the couch and shows up and takes on everybody. And it's just that epic moment of like the Patriot is with him, and he's like, and Cap calls Avengers assemble, and he's like, I can't believe that, like, I'm part of that right now. Like that excitement, like totally forgets he's getting ready to launch into a superpower battle, and he's just like a little kid all giddy because he's like, I'm part of the Avengers.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And it just like, it capped off for me like such a fascinating run of comics, right? Where Osborn and the Dark Reign, like they hunted down so many, and you had Carol Danvers who just split, and she was like, nope, you guys are nuts. You know, you got to see Bullseye as Hawkeye, like take on that persona, but can't rein in his murderous like
right
side of who he is, like kills the Sentry's wife, like pushes her out of a helicopter and convinces him that he's responsible for it. Like just some horrific things that they do during that stretch. And it was just amazing.
That was a really good event. Yeah. And wasn't that guy Hood involved somehow? He like got powered
Red
up.
Hood. No, Red Hood's
the DC guy.
but yeah, the Hood.
Yeah, the Hood.
And he's
kind of a criminal, just sort of a street level criminal, but got powered up and had a team, and he was pretty tough for a while, and he was part of that. But then there was the Thor clone that they had run because Thor had disappeared for a while, and somehow they're like, well, you know, we need a Thor around, and so they had this clone. And when Thor found that, like, he was less than happy about there being a clone of him around.
I don't remember Ragnarok being part of that as much as he was like Civil War. Okay. I remember him being part of Civil War.
Maybe I'm mixing those together.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
But the Thor brings that all to a close though with Sentry, and then like
he fly. That's when we see Thor like flies up to the sun with Sentry's body and just lets it go, and it float, and he's like literally just hanging out there.
Yeah.
And that was one of those points that we talked about it a while ago in one of our previous episodes of like the powered up episode where you see some characters get depowered and then suddenly have a bunch of power. And that was one of those series where he gets taken out by a bunch of like the Dark Avengers who have been powered up, but you're like, how did you guys beat Thor? And then all of a sudden he beats Sentry and puts Sentry's body into the sun. You're like, I am not okay with this. This is like, you guys, it's too confusing.
Yeah.
Like,
well, and then fast forward to War of Realms, and Thor literally bathes in the sun. But that's a whole other thing.
But what's as we're coming up on time for this this episode, I think we got time for at least one more. What's one more, Dave?
Well, good question. How about something a little smaller and a little fun? There was just recently, it wasn't so much a crossover event. It was called Heroes Reborn, and it spun out of the Avengers book, where they had just done the Phoenix Force was back, and they had to go through a whole little like battle for that. Which that was on the heels of what was the X-Men one where they all had to battle, like they got chosen for a battle. X of Swords, that was decent. That was good. But that was a good one. And then like 10 seconds later, the Avengers are doing exactly the same thing, like getting chosen for a battle. Like what is going on here?
Yeah.
But out of that spun like Mephisto's messing around with the world, and Coulson created a whole new like pocket universe or something where the Avengers never existed.
Right. But Blade remembers.
Supreme. Yeah. But like, Blade remembers
and goes around and hunts up all the original Avengers and goes after like Squadron Supreme, who's like clearly off their rocker.
Yes.
More in alignment with like the mentality of the boys from, to your reference earlier than like the Avengers. Yeah. And that was and
it was only like six issues, so it wasn't long, and it wasn't a universe spanning thing, but I enjoyed that. I enjoyed the dive into the complete GLA knockoff that is the Squadron Supreme.
Yeah. I actually, that one kind of felt a little weird for me. I don't know why. It was like so I can get caught up, and self-admittedly I can get caught up and hung up on like a little point that doesn't make sense to me. And my point was, how did Blade end up being the only one that remembered everything? How everybody
I don't
else
think
had
they
those
ever
little,
explained it.
no,
Right?
they never
I don't
explained
think
it. Like,
so.
please, if you're listening out there and you write comic books, it matters. Take time, explain how that happened, because when you don't, I go crazy.
And we don't want John to go crazy. Don't make John go crazy. You wouldn't like John when he goes crazy.
Wouldn't like me when I'm crazy. So yeah, I think that I got hung up on that, and then it was I kind of was like, I don't understand anymore. And just that I was like, I'll read it when it comes around, but I wasn't like searching it out.
Yeah.
How
about you?
I want to go to I want to go to, because we covered so much Marvel space, and there've been some amazing DC ones as well. And I want to talk about like a recent one that we were just talking about the other day that oh man, never mind. I'm gonna go back to a different one, because now that I think about it, it's like we were just talking about it a little bit earlier in a format, but the Injustice storyline.
Oh wow.
I don't think, there's so many, there've been a lot of great DC ones. You've had Infinite Crisis, or Crisis on Infinite Worlds,
Flashpoint.
Flashpoint. I think there's some of the more recent ones, like the DC versus Vampires, which is pretty fun. Pretty good. Deceased, which was an interesting take on, like, to me, it was the DC answer to Marvel Zombies. It's still really good. But Injustice was such an intense storyline. Now, there are moments in that series where the art misses for me, like pretty big swing and a miss, but it's one of those that from a storytelling standpoint was so strong that it was compelling enough to just keep going. I mean, the idea of the Joker just deciding, I got tired of, always losing, so I wanted to see what it was like when I win. So I picked an easier target, and he decided Superman was the easier target. And and out of
crazy to think about,
right? Which is crazy to think about, but I mean, the way they explained it totally made sense. But when you think about all of the heroes versus heroes, right? I think you can't talk about it without bringing up that line, because it ran for a really long time. It's become its own universe,
right? Yeah, I say now we're kind of going out of the realm of an event to its own. It became its own thing. I don't know if that was always the plan, or just did so well that here's year 2 and 3 and 4 and 5, but yeah, it was very interesting for quite a while. I have eventually kind of ran out of steam on that one.
It goes into
the first like 2 years of it, I thought were really, really strong.
Yeah, it goes into some weird places. I will admit, like when it did the Injustice He-Man crossover, I was like, I
don't think I lasted that long. I think
I read that one.
I think I was bowed out at the Injustice versus like the Greek gods part.
Oh yeah, that was interesting. I read that one. But yeah, it definitely, I think that's the difference, obviously, between the two, is that if we're looking at it against like Civil War, right? Because it was kind of a defining heroes versus heroes storyline in DC, just like Civil War was clearly a heroes versus heroes like defining moment,
right?
And I think that in terms of that aspect, it eventually left being a crossover, like interesting alternate universe event, into a much longer like story in and of itself. Now, I think that's where the Snyderverse was trying to go eventually.
Yeah.
Like you really get that feeling.
Yes.
Especially from like the nightmare sequences.
Yes. Right.
which would have been cool to see. I mean, it would have been interesting. I would have loved to see that on screen and see how they dealt with that. They did an animated movie version. Did you watch that?
I have not.
You're not really missing anything.
That's what I've heard. Yeah.
They made so many changes.
Hmm.
So many changes.
Okay.
That it just kind of missed.
Yeah.
And then yeah, so Injustice, but DC has had its share of like some pretty amazing stuff, like Flashpoint.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
Flashpoint, it's so good. That one's getting a movie, which is going to bring us apparently like multiple versions of Batman.
Yeah.
I hope for the sake of fans of that storyline, because Flashpoint was epic.
Mm-hmm.
My hope is that they don't shy away from the Aquaman, Wonder Woman,
big battle. Yeah.
Big battle aspect, especially with like, she kills Shazam.
Yeah.
As a kid.
Yeah.
Makes him say the word and then kills him.
Yep.
That's like one of those you're just like, what just happened?
Yeah.
But
spoiler alert, by the way.
Yeah, spoiler alert in terms of the comics. We don't know what'll happen in the movie.
Right. No, not at all. Yeah, they could very well do something completely different.
Yeah, but that was a great one. I mean, there's a lot of really good ones, and then you've got the ones that you're just, that clearly are cash grabs, and like Civil War II, the AVX, like spinoff from Avengers versus X-Men. So
I'm sure there are plenty others. So obviously we can only hit a few. What those of you listening, what did you like? What events have drawn you in? Which ones are you not such a big fan of?
What do you want to see brought to this big screen?
Yeah, good question.
Right. I would like, I mean, they're going to do Secret Invasion.
Yep.
That was a big one. That was a great one. Such a good storyline there that obviously led into Dark Avengers and a whole bunch of others. So, what would you like to see on the big screen? There's some great stories that could still be done on the big screen.
So let us know. Awesome, everybody. Thanks for being along for another fun ride here. We hope you enjoyed it as much as we did, because we always have a good time doing this.
Yeah.
Check us out on all the socials and be in touch.
Yeah.
All right, friends. Well, until next time, true believers.
Bye guys.